Comic Boom.
Hey guys, Comic Boom here to pose the question, along with Dark Knight Nation. Can a happy Batman be effective? Tom King? I'm not sure what Tom King thinks. Tom King writes a very depressed Batman. A Batman that repeatedly fails, and that repeatedly gets humiliated, and he has to be saved by Catwoman. Tom King is exploring that question. Can a happy Batman be effective? Tom King's answer would appear to be no, at least so far. But Tom King's run isn't finished yet. But in a more general sense, and in the context of Tom King's Batman, Darknightnation and I discuss, can a happy Batman be effective? What does that even mean? What does a happy Batman even look like? How does he even behave? Does that even make any sense? Is it a stupid question to pose? Well, Tom King's the one that's posing the question. He's got like 100 and how many issues of Batman that he's exploring the question with, right? So, let's check it out. So, enjoy this debate between Dark Knight Nation and I. And when you're done, go check out Dark Knight Nation's channel, because we also discuss Scott Snyder and Scott Snyder's run and Scott Snyder's approach to Batman. So check out my buddy Dark Knight Nation's channel as well when you're finished watching this YouTube broadcast. And thanks, guys, and I'll catch you on the flip side.
So the big question is that King's Batman kind of asks is a happy Batman effective? Not only that, what happens when you take that happiness away, right? Because I feel like going into Batman, you can already assume that a certain level of his happiness or his contentness was taken away the night his parents died. And that's when he kind of, the process of him becoming Batman was set into motion right then and there. But in Tom King's Batman, he kind of spends the first, 24 issues-ish, just establishing who his Batman is. And then we see, from then on, he proposes his rise to happiness for the most part, and then his fall, currently. And then maybe being built up again now. I don't know. I dropped Batman, so for whatever. But yeah, I think the big question with King is just asking, can a happy Batman be effective? What happens when that happiness is ripped away from him, and can he recover from that, right? Can he be happy again? So I'm curious, because I know that you have been consistently reading Tom King's Batman through and through. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think in Tom King's writing has kind of pushed that question? How do you feel like, how do you personally feel on the topic? Do you think that King is accurately kind of conveying what could be considered the right answer to the question?
Well, first of all, I think King is conveying an answer to the question, because I think it can differ from writer to writer and reader to reader. In particular, just to back up a little bit, Tom King makes a couple of assumptions about what is it that he presumes makes Batman happy in the first place. And that the presumption and the assumption King has made, in my view, is a relationship with Catwoman. That seems to be one of the things that King's run seems to suggest, that his relationship with Catwoman, that his love for Catwoman, he's obtained happiness because he's got the family, or a love akin to a love that he described between his parents, which is kind of ironic because the relationship between Flashpoint Batman and Martha was was not particularly good, but I digress a little bit. But it's interesting that he talks about, it's always about Catwoman, and even Catwoman recently returning at the end of issue 75, Catwoman returning is almost like a return to his one source of strength. It's this, so it's interesting that King sort of attributes very strongly Batman's happiness with a woman, with having a woman in his life. To me, that's absolutely clear. And we could talk about Batman's extended family, but King has really been played short thrift with Batman's extended family. He hasn't had a lot of focus on stories with Batman's family, with the exception of Alfred. It's been Alfred and Selina Kyle, that has really been the source of Batman's happiness. And so what's interesting about that is, it's interesting that King starts from that assumption, in my view, and then when he takes that away, just what's interesting is just how badly Batman's life falls apart just because a woman leaves him. And I'm not saying that that's not accurate, because look, I've been through a divorce once myself. I believe it took 1.5 years for me to get my head out of my butt. It happens, you hit these low points in relationships. And so in that respect, I think a lot of people might be able to relate to a Batman like that. If the only source of your happiness is one woman or one patriarchal figure like Alfred, I can imagine that if you lose those things, you're going to be unhappy. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, the interesting thing that you bring up is as a character, is Batman/Bruce Wayne's happiness focalized on a relationship, on a romantic relationship with a woman, and you also bring up his patriarchal figure, and it's interesting because Batman's relationship with women is really kind of, for the most part, I think there's reason to believe that Catwoman might be a little bit different throughout his continuity, but it's usually very cut and dry. Bruce Wayne has the woman he cares about, realizes that he can't also be in love, have a relationship, and be Batman, so he chooses out of a sense of duty to be Batman and gives the woman up. And or if you're Jezebel Jet, they try to kill you. So it's interesting because I think that one of the big questions, I guess, to ask is the mechanism or the vehicle by which Tom King is asking the question as to whether or not a happy Batman can be effective, and that the happiness surrounding around his romantic relationship has a little bit more precedence with Selina Kyle in particular, right? So even though, depending on what continuity you want to look at, he had a child with Talia al Ghul, whether or not it was consensual or not, in prior continuity it was consensual, right? He's always shown more of an affinity for Selina. There's a basis for that in the Golden Age. There's a basis for that in something as recent as, like, Batman Hush, Do I think that... I think that there is a world where Batman lets his guard down a little bit for Selina. Just because they have such a particularly different relationship with one another versus what Bruce has had with any other woman ever. I mean, looking at Selina is kind of looking at and as is, a majority of Batman's rogue gallery, looking at Batman under a mirror and then focalizing on a particular aspect of the character. And I guess Selina is just kind of like the general morality, like she kind of lacks that same morality as Bruce, and can that huge difference kind of jive with one another. And I think one of the things Tom King plays at is the fact that, well, opposites definitely attract, right? Like he doesn't spare any detail about how Selina doesn't care to be like I don't even know. That's what I'm thinking in my head isn't correct. But she doesn't care to conform to what Bruce wants. And to some degree, it seems like maybe she wanted to be a better human, but like before her wedding, she went and stole a dress, even though her fiance was one of the richest men in the world. Just because that is inherently who she is. I don't quite think that centrally Batman's kind of shining star of happiness is romance for me. Tom King makes a fairly decent argument about it in general. Is it well executed? I would say no. But it's a somewhat valid question. For me, I think Batman's happiness really just revolves on whether or not he's an effective Batman. But even then, I feel like his own psychosis kind of forces him to kind of walk down this infinite cycle of I'm successful, but not successful enough. And it just keeps going around and around and around. So can Batman be satiated, I think, is like the real answer. Because I think he has his spouts of happiness. And I think that he is happy in different aspects of his life. But I think the question for me with Batman and like, can Batman be satiated? Because I think that he can be happy in different aspects of his life. Yes. And it also, again, it's totally different depending on how you define Batman's happiness. So I don't quite agree that his romantic relationship with Selina is kind of the sole central wielder of Batman's happiness. I think there's an argument to be made that it is a vital part to Batman's happiness, but I don't think it's the end-all be-all.
I don't think it is either, and I think that I do think that there is I think that Tom King has spent too much time on the issue. I think he's made it more complicated than it needs to be. In my view, men in general, when we get families, when we get married and have a family, it affects our work. We generally become, this is a statistical fact, and it's a psychological fact. We generally become more responsible. We generally save more money. We generally do things more consistently when we become fathers. The more people that rely upon us, when we have families, it changes the way we think, and we generally become different people. And more responsible, again, generally speaking. And so, it's Batman. The more family that Batman has in his extended Batman family, I think it would be naive to assume that it doesn't affect his behavior. It affects the decisions he makes. When you have more to lose and more people are relying upon you, it affects your behavior. It affects your tactics. It affects your strategy. And so that's one of the, I think, criticisms of Tom King's run is he's trying to come along and he's posing a question. And in my view, while it's a great question and it's great to talk about, I think it's more interesting to explore with other writers, which we're going to be doing. But Tom King, in my view, to ask the question, can a happy Batman be an effective Batman? To me, you can't really definitively answer that question. And while focusing almost exclusively on Selina. You have to have more of the extended Batman family in that dynamic, including Alfred, and he just doesn't have that. It's just been an exclusive focus usually on Alfred and Selina, and everyone else gets very short thrift. And in any event, I will say this, that when here's where it gets interesting, is because you mentioned a good point about the psychosis of Batman. He's got this obsession, and the fact of the matter is those people that are obsessed with work, and they put in 16-hour days, and they rise to the top of their field as a CEO or whatever the case might be. They generally, their family like suckers. They've got terrible personal lives. There's a price you pay for it. And the question is, with Batman, can a happy Batman be an effective Batman? At some point, you got to ask, well, where does the happy Bruce Wayne come into play? Because you could, because if we're going to look at that dichotomy, to me, a happy Bruce Wayne, I view more as, because Tom King is sort of mixing the two up. When Tom King asks a question about a happy Batman, he's really wondering if Batman has a happy relationship with Selina, can he be an effective Batman? Well, that's Bruce Wayne, isn't it? But do you know what I mean? Like, he's merging the two. Whereas in my view, if you have a really happy Bruce Wayne, I see a happy Bruce Wayne being Batman less and less and less.
Yes.
Because, it's, to me, it's like being close to retirement. If you've got everything you wanted, and you're a billionaire, you can help people by cutting a check to charity. Well, so what if you're Batman? Why not sit back and relax and enjoy being Bruce Wayne if you got a wife like Selina Kyle? But that might make for boring reading in a comic book.
No, and on that, I think, moreover, I think people have generally misconstrued, and even Tom King has misconstrued. I think unknowingly he's moreover asking the question is, can a happy Bruce Wayne work in conjunction to be an effective Batman? You know what I'm saying? Because I totally agree with you. He's kind of dropping the duality of the character and making them one thing. But the one of the special things and one of the dynamic things about Batman is, although yes, Bruce Wayne and Batman are in the same body, right?
Yeah.
They also are two kind of separate personalities or egos explored, again, in like Darwin Cook's Batman Ego, which is fantastic. If you haven't read it, go read it. But like, yes, they are simultaneously the same person, but they are the same person with their own separate wants, desires, and driving forces, right? And generally speaking, Bruce Wayne comes second to Batman. Yeah. So in a world where Bruce Wayne is happy, well, I mean, one would be led to believe that that's the point where Bruce Wayne takes priority over Batman. So for me, I think just answering Tom King's question, is a happy Batman effective? And then extrapolating that, or breaking, I wouldn't even say extrapolating, I think opening that up to what it really seems to be asking is, can a Batman be effective when Bruce Wayne is happy? No. I'm going to say no. I think that he can be content to a degree. I think Bruce Wayne naturally is content if Batman is the forefront. You know what I'm saying? But I do not think that Batman is at his most effective when Bruce Wayne is kind of the one in the chair. You know, when Bruce Wayne is the one making the decisions. I think that, you know, I don't even want to say I think that. One of Batman's definitive driving forces is kind of the sadness and the darkness that's inside of him. And that does cause him to repress Bruce Wayne. And I don't even want to say a little bit, because quite a bit. And one of the reasons why I take to Scott Snyder's Batman, and, you know, we'll get into that at some point along like this little video series, is, you know, is the darkness Batman's driving force? And how effective is that? And the reason, you know, spoilers, that I like that so much is that I think that it's true. I think the darkness is primarily Batman's driving force. But, and also kind of tying this partly into what Brian Azzarello did in Damned, you also have to ask another question is, but can Batman operate alone? You know what I'm saying? Does Batman need Bruce Wayne? And yes, to a degree, I think to have an effective, to have Batman at its most effective, you need to have Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne needs to exist. Bruce Wayne can't be completely devoid of happiness. Yeah. But Bruce Wayne needs to be there to kind of put Batman in check. It's kind of like how the United States government should work on paper, but in Batman. Yeah,
I think, and just sort of building on what you're saying, I find it very interesting with Tom King. In the private moments, if you look at Tom King's run, whenever there's a private moment between Catwoman and Batman, even when they're out of costume, it's very, very interesting that Bruce will always say to Selina, "I love you, Cat." She says, "I love you, Bats." They refer to each other as Bat and Cat in their intimate moments, more so than Bruce and Selina. And I find that interesting because it's almost as if they allow themselves to love each other as Batman and Catwoman, almost more so than they do as Selina and Bruce. And I find that interesting because if you look at the history of Batman's relationships by other writers with different women, some of the relationships are as Bruce Wayne with the woman, and they don't even know that he's Batman. The closest comparison between a Batman, Catwoman relationship would be Batman and Talia al Ghul, because Talia, she basically fell in love with Batman. It was a Batman because Batman was worthy of her father's legacy, right?
Right.
And I find that interesting. You know, I just find it interesting if it was deliberate, the choice of words that Tom King uses when in those moments between Selina and Bruce, when they say, "I love you, Bat, I love you, Cat," and they're arguing about when they met. Did we meet on a boat or did we meet on a rooftop? In both situations, they were in their superhero guises, not as their human, you know, their human alter egos. So I don't know if that means something or not, but I think it does at some level.
Well, the interesting thing about the relationship is Batman pretty much has a somewhat clear demarcation between Batman and Bruce Wayne, right? And those personas. Selina Kyle has reconciled Selina Kyle and Catwoman. They are the same person. You know, there's nothing separating Selina Kyle from Catwoman but a mask. And so it provides an interesting question, and why I think it makes Tom King's premise also lack a little bit more effectiveness is because, you know, maybe perhaps those word choices are very particular and you know, very specific because he wants to compare their dualities. But to me, there is no duality to Selina Kyle. You know what I'm saying? Selina Kyle is the gutter rat that grew up on the streets, that became, you know, the thief. I think Catwoman is essentially what Selina evolved into. Unlike Batman and Bruce Wayne, yes, Batman has evolved, but Batman and Bruce Wayne have always coexisted. Selina Kyle and Catwoman are the same thing. They're the same person. And one of the things that I saw when I was still reading Tom King's Batman was that Selina Kyle is reconciled Selina Kyle and Catwoman. You know what I'm saying? She is simultaneous okay with marrying Bruce Wayne and Batman and also being a thief. You know what I'm saying? And she's not really ashamed of that. So, you know, it provides. I mean, you could really go down the rabbit hole pretty much in any regard to the question, right? To this central premise of an effective Batman and happiness and how those things are proportional to one another, and you know, obviously, particularly looking at whether or not Batman's happiness revolves around his romantic relationship with Selina Kyle. So I'm wondering, because I feel like I've already generally given my answer to the question, is a happy Batman effective? Therefore, is like also asking the question, is Batman effective with a happy Bruce Wayne? Like, if you were to kind of put your thoughts into summation, how would you answer that question for yourself?
Look, I'm an optimist, and at the end of the day, this is what I choose to believe, that a happy Batman can be very much an effective Batman. I think it's possible. But I would add to that, and maybe I'm cheating a bit here, but to me, a happy Batman is one that has a healthy relationship with his Bruce Wayne persona. And you can, to me, it's about balance. I mean, how many times do we say that in our life? It's always about balance. And you have to have a healthy balance. And there's a tendency for writers, and particularly Tom King, I think he focuses far more on the Batman and less the Bruce Wayne here. Although, you know, on the surface, it might seem like he understands Bruce Wayne because he's got date night between Bruce and Selina and Lois and Clark. But really, his Batman is all about Batman. It's about, can a happy Batman be an effective Batman? And there's not a lot of the Bruce Wayne there, not as much as there ought to be in my mind. And to me, it's about balance. Can a happy Batman be an effective Batman? I say, of course he can. Of course he can. To me, it's about where is he putting his focus? Where is he putting his focus? And that's his biggest problem. You know, the Buddhists have a saying, you know, the bucket fills drop by drop. Batman's bucket often gets filled. And if you don't know if your bucket's full, you might be filled with stress and anxiety. You got to empty your bucket once in a while. Batman never really has a handle on whether or not his bucket's full. And sometimes he's got to just dump his bucket and relax. And Selina, Catwoman, is there to dump his bucket. She's the stress relief, the anxiety. She's the sober second thought that says, hey, Bat, hey, Bruce, rest, take a break. Everything's fine. You got a huge Bat family here. You know, Batman is, so he can be a happy Batman, but he's just got to learn balance.
Yeah. But here's the big thing, though, is I think Tom King is confusing, and again, it also rides on your notion that he's writing more for Batman. Simultaneously, though, I think he's confusing Bruce Wayne's happiness with Batman's happiness. Because I don't think the Batman ego is relevantly concerned with the romantic relationship. That's Bruce Wayne, right? Like that's the boy who lost his parents and is lonely and wants somebody to understand him and hold him and love him. So it's weird because obviously, again, it goes back to that duality of Batman and Bruce Wayne and whether or not you're asking the question is Batman effective when both Batman and Bruce Wayne are happy? Is Batman effective when Bruce Wayne is happy? Is Batman effective when just Batman is happy, right? Because Batman and Bruce Wayne have two different wants and desires. So I think that just Tom King is aiming that question really awkwardly because he's asking, can Batman be happy? Well, you're playing with concepts of Bruce Wayne's happiness, right? Because Bruce Wayne is the one that wants the love, not necessarily Batman. And I think, again, tying into another writer we'll be talking about later down the line, Tomasi in his detective run, right, brings up the fact that Batman is this vehicle for that sense of duty that he has to protect the innocent and prevent the thing that happened to him from happening to anyone else. And he will do anything for it. And Batman will not be happy until his job is done. And his job will never be done, right? So as soon as Batman feels like his job is done, Batman is no longer effective. So just looking and framing that question particularly at Batman, I don't think Batman, the ego of Batman, can be happy to be effective because then Batman doesn't have a purpose. Batman's driving force is the feelings of loneliness, sadness, loss, and wanting to prevent that from happening to anybody else. Can Batman be happy? Can Batman be effective when Bruce Wayne is happy? Somewhat, generally speaking, yes. But I think that there comes a point when Bruce Wayne becomes so happy that Bruce Wayne becomes the focus of that dichotomy, and that gradient kind of shifts to Bruce Wayne, and he becomes the central deciding force. And although we're not going to be talking about like the Dark Knight Returns, you know, in this because it's not really modern, but if you look at it, once like Bruce, Batman eventually feels so deprived that Batman persona comes back in full, potentially in a very unhealthy way. But at the end of the day, Batman will never go away until he's satiated. But and if you look at the way that Frank Miller handles it, Batman is also he can never be happy unless Batman finishes his job. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. It just provides this really kind of infinite cycle, you know, and then it stems off into all these different directions with specifying between Batman and Bruce Wayne and how you personally view that dichotomy. So at the end of the day, I understand what you're saying because you're kind of trying to apply a little bit more of a real world application of happiness and specifically how that romance affects a man. But I think that Batman is already this man of myth, this man of legend. He's not a normal human, very clearly. So I personally wouldn't be able to apply those same definitions to Batman, you know, just based on what I've seen and what I've read of him. I don't think that Batman can ever be happy to be effective because, again, if Batman itself is happy, it doesn't exist.
Well, and I think that just to add to that, I think the challenge that Selina brought, the challenge that Catwoman brings to Batman is there's that expression that there's the two most important events in a person's life is the day they were born, and the second is the day they find out why. Mm-hmm. And for Batman, Bruce Wayne's reason to exist is that he was meant to be Batman. It's his reason for being. And arguably, you could say that, you know, he lives to serve people by protecting them. And I think he always assumed he would never be happy because he doesn't have time to be Bruce Wayne. He doesn't have time to settle down and be Bruce Wayne family man, right? But Catwoman challenges that because Catwoman does what he does. So he doesn't have to be Bruce Wayne to be happy. In other words, to have a relationship, because Catwoman can be his female counterpart. And that's the interesting dynamic. So even if Batman was inclined to think, I can never have that kind of life, I can never have the happiness that I long for, Catwoman comes along, and for the first time, he realizes that, well, wait a minute, this woman she's becoming an aspect of my Batman self. I don't have to be Bruce Wayne to seek my happiness. Oh my God, I can actually stay Batman and be happy because this woman is moving more toward me as opposed to myself, you know, where she's more like I am. And I think that's what's interesting is that, to put it another way, can a happy Catwoman be an effective Catwoman? You know, I mean, so can an unhappy Catwoman and an unhappy Batman be happy together?
Well, I think the interesting thing about the two characters in just kind of asking questions about how content they are is really interesting because I feel like both Batman and Selina Kyle Catwoman or neither of them are ever really satisfied, ever, no matter what they do. You know, Selina's looking for the next thrill. And to her, you know, the thing that attracted her in many iterations to Batman is the fact that he's a thrill, right? Like he's a challenge. And to me, I just personally, I don't think, you know, based on what I've seen from Selina, I don't think that she could ever just be satisfied with that relationship with Bruce because it loses a bit of that flair, it loses a bit of the cat and mouse, and it loses that thrill, right? Because and it does very much play on like that paradox and that kind of stereotype about women, you know, like they want what they can't have. And so what happens when they have it? There's nothing to play for. But also, again, for me, I think that Batman, like, he's trying to fulfill Bruce Wayne's wants through Batman. But for me, the Batman persona itself is never satisfied until his mission is done. So it's weird because he's trying to fulfill Bruce Wayne through Batman. And again, for me personally, I don't think, you know, the most effective Batman is a happy Batman. I think he can be content with where things are, you know, and I think that the family and Alfred provide a level of that contentness. I think, you know, but at the same time, no matter how well he does as Batman, he's always going to drive to do better, and that was really well exemplified in Detective 999, you know, where he's running that simulation, and he says, you know, like, oh, like crime has been cut into a fraction every year that Batman has been around, and he says, well, it doesn't matter because we do this until it reaches absolute zero.
Yeah, but the same thing can be said for happiness. No one is ever 100% happy, and so you can be 99% happy, and there's still going to be those that are striving for that 1%. Life itself is about the struggle. Life isn't fair. It's about the journey. It's about the struggle. So, I mean, when we talk about happiness, I mean, I think we have to be realistic about what standard are we setting for Batman. I mean, we're talking about, even if we just talk general contentment, I think just how he always struggles to be the best crime fighter and always eliminating all crime, you could still at the same time struggle, move toward that happiness. And it's not a zero-sum game. It's always sort of like you move toward happiness by inches, not by leaps and bounds. To me, for Batman, there's got to be a part of him that enjoys the adrenaline rush. I mean, he is crime fighting. He wouldn't be doing it if at some level he wasn't happy fighting crime. And so, it's kind of a, to me, that's why I said about Tom King. To me, I think the significant aspect of it is Selina represents almost like a normal life for him, or some semblance of a normal life, and he's never really had that, because he's never really had much of a family, given the trauma that initiated his course of his life. But
well, it just unravels into so many different threads, because you and I think, are both very much looking at Batman's happiness in two very different directions, and in what regard does the happiness serve Batman versus Bruce Wayne, and both of them together, so on and so forth. So I think it brings up a lot of really interesting and relevant questions about how to really define it. And I don't think you can truly 100% define what Batman's happiness means, and there are going to be so many different interpretations for that. But I wonder, so moving forward, because I know that you're continuing to read Tom King's Batman long after, it's kind of lost its shine. Do you personally think so? You've stated kind of your central premise on Batman's happiness.
Right.
Do you think Tom King's Batman has been effective at answering the question?
He's still in the middle of answering, to be quite blunt, because that's part of the criticism of the story. Has it been effective in answering the question? I would say no, it hasn't been effective in answering the question yet. I think, it's leading toward that. Selina Kyle has recently returned. I suspect he's going to do a little bit of a cop-out. At some point, he's going to restore the status quo. It's hard to say, because Tom King is such relentless. All his stories ended in depression. Kills off characters. He's really he's very cynical in many ways. I mean, all his stories at some level involve some level of depression, and so I'd like to think it's going to end on a high note. I think the purpose of Tom King is to, at the end of the day, show that a happy Batman can be an effective Batman, and I think that is where he's going to likely go. I think he's going to go toward the balance, like I said. I think that's the point, is that, because with Selina returning and sort of rescuing him, he's hit rock bottom. I mean, basically, he's hit rock bottom now, and his father, Flashpoint Batman, believes that he's given up. He's been defeated. He's been completely defeated. He's been shown that he's not needed anymore. Gotham's no longer his. The city of Bane, he's completely lost. And Flashpoint Batman believes that, and Alfred keeps warning Flashpoint Batman, saying, you're wrong. He's going to come back. Look out, he's going to come back. And so to me, this is Batman. Batman's rebooting, and he's going to come back stronger than ever. I haven't answered your question yet, and I hate saying this, but I don't feel confident enough in King's writing to say definitively to answer your question. I know you want me to come down one way or the other. I think that a happy Batman can be an effective Batman. Do I think that Tom King's story is going to convincingly make that argument? I can't say it will, no.
Okay.
Not
No, I
whatever
mean,
it's
I think you answered the question quite well, and I think that's kind of like a good way to wrap up this segment. I think we both really thoroughly stated our perspectives on what happiness means to Batman, and whether or not we think our definition of happiness for Batman would allow him to be effective or not. Personally, just regarding kind of King penning and asking the question, I mean, I dropped the book. So by all means, no, I don't think he was very effective in asking the question, just by virtue of the fact that I think he ignores a lot of predicated history of the character, and I think that that's really important to asking the question. I don't fault him for having a different definition of Batman's happiness, right? Because, you know, well enough, I think you and I had different definitions of Batman and what happiness means to him, and I'm not, you know, over here, you know, ripping my eyeballs out because of it. So I can't fault him for that, but like you, I don't think Tom King has really written, you know, a story that can really beg the question and take us on the journey that would make us feel like he's convincing us of anything. And part of it is definitely because, like I said, I think that he lacks, you know, predisposed characterization. But yeah, just really things of that nature. I think that pretty much wraps up the segment on Tom King.
Well, thanks for joining us, guys. That's the debate that Dark Knight Nation and I had. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and follow me on Twitter at Metropolis40. Check out Dark Knight Nation's channel at Dark Knight Nation. And leave your comments below. What do you think, can an effective Batman be happy and effective at the same time, or is it all nonsense? Let us know what you guys think. And until next time, Comic Boom out.